It's a short week coming off another egg for Nebraska football. Can they respond?
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase.
All right, welcome in. It is Monday of Thanksgiving week. Before Saturday night, by the way, I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is back with me from an undisclosed location with the giant casino in the back outside of his window.
I wonder what that is. I don't have any idea. I apologize in advance for the changing contrasts behind me throughout this period of time. I very well could lower the shade, but I wanted to, yeah, I mean, here it is. It's beautiful Las Vegas. That's where I'm coming to you from today.
Connor's out there for some basketball work this week. He'll be back. He'll be back for Thanksgiving, right?
Oh yeah, I'll be back on Tuesday night. I'll be back in my home studio on the Wednesday pod.
All right. So as I was saying, before Saturday night at Penn State, Nebraska this year had really just laid one egg. I'm not going to classify the Michigan and USC games that way, but Minnesota, it absolutely was. It was the outlier, the anomaly, the one game this year that kind of made you look funny at the way that Matt Rhule was progressing through year 3 at Nebraska. But I think you could live with it. Well, now there are 2 of those games, and I don't know how people feel. Well, I have an idea of how people feel with 2 of those games in an 11-game stretch in one regular season with another opportunity for success or a third anomaly to occur in this Nebraska season. The bowl game to me is always a wild card. I think whatever happens there, it just happens. As long as you're not in the CFP, you have to accept it, because in recent years with these opt-outs and coaching shuffles and the transfer portal, it's effectively a game that you just don't know what you're going to get. But in the regular season, in a conference championship game, you have to come to expect the team to perform the way that it's been coached to perform. And now twice in 11 games, Nebraska, as you said, has laid an egg. So almost unexplainably bad at Minnesota, and then again at Penn State on Saturday night in a 37-10 loss. If you missed our reaction show, I had it covered while Connor was on the radio late Saturday night in Omaha. That is posted on YouTube and all of the podcast listening platforms. So this is better than what Nebraska has done in some recent years, but this is not where Nebraska is supposed to be here in 2025. I thought Nebraska was past this kind of a thing being a repeat in one season. Saturday gave me some pause in thinking that. We've now had 24 hours or so to consider what happened out there at Beaver Stadium. What are your thoughts on that event?
Yeah, I'm not gonna put it all into the egg category. I think there's a fair amount of that, and then obviously it snowballs on you. But I thought early in the first several drives of the game or first quarter or whatever it might be, and then especially I think the tone of the game changed after Nebraska's first drive when they go for it on 4th down and they don't get the touchdown, they get stopped, and then Penn State goes right down and drives it 98 yards. Like, the tone and the tenor of the game changes sort of from there. But on that first drive for Penn State, I mean, they're pushing Nebraska around a little bit. So I didn't feel like that was effort or toughness or whatever in the early going. I guess it all comes down to, effort and toughness at the end of the day. But I just felt like Nebraska was kind of outmanned in that situation. I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody and make it any more palatable. I don't know, that might make it less palatable for you. But I think there's a fair amount where Nebraska just had to really, really dig in and play with an edge, something that Penn State did all night long. I mean, and I think that's the part that makes it really difficult to swallow for Nebraska fans. In the weekend and early this week, they said they were record hunting. They're using this as a platform to to hire the interim coach, and it's this really, really warm, feel good type of thing for Penn State, and it happened because it didn't have to happen that way, right? And so that one hurts. That's part of it, but I don't think it was all like, well, they just didn't show up to Penn State that night. I thought eventually it became that, but at the very beginning, I kind of just felt like Nebraska was getting pushed around, and they were better.
Yeah, and I think that's reason for alarm, and I think that
both reasons for alarm, right? For sure,
right. But that gets away a little bit from the topic that I introduced, so we'll get to some of that in the second segment. But to stick with what I was saying, I understand what you're saying, and if you threw this score at me with that result and those numbers and some of the plays that Penn State executed against Nebraska, where the Nittany Lions were just pushing the pile, and it didn't matter if Nebraska tried to go with a 5-man defensive front or whatever it was trying to do. Penn State, as we said going into this game, we all knew Penn State was going to run the football. It was the easiest scout you could ever have about an opponent. They're going to line up and they're going to run the football, and they're going to keep running it until Nebraska shows that it can stop the run game. And what amazed me, and I noticed this as I was going through the reaction pod and had the stats over my right shoulder on this screen here, Penn State only ran 51 plays in that game. I think that's the number, 39 runs in 12 passes. It controlled the game, but that tells you a little bit about just the chunks of yardage that it was getting. Ended up being 6 yards a rush or 5.9 yards a rush. It felt like more than that. And Penn State had the short field at times because Nebraska started to uncharacteristically implode, even lost the game by a wide margin in special teams, which we've not seen happen at any point this year. The fake punt that Nebraska failed to cover, which was a bit of a low blow to run a fake punt when you're up 20 points in the fourth quarter. But whatever. As you said, this turned into like a cathartic night. Yeah. Penn State, like a feel-good night. You're going to do whatever you can, pull out all the stops. You're going to send a message to the athletic director that everybody in that stadium, or at least on the field, I don't think everybody in that stadium, but everybody on the field there in Penn State colors wants to see Terry Smith get that job. So you're going to use Nebraska as the exhibit to make that case, which is really disheartening for Matt Rhule and for Nebraska that you can be in that position here. But yeah, I guess we're to believe, if you want to go with what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you, that Penn State, this is the Penn State that has been missing all year. Like, these are the guys, they got it all together. They couldn't find this team for 10 games. Maybe you could say against Indiana, which is certainly a top 5 team in the country, and Penn State played them down to the wire. But so it's been coming a bit. But this is the Penn State team that you would have expected to be on the field when you saw that little number 2 by their name before the season. If you just said, well, Nebraska's going to lose in Happy Valley 37-10 back in August, I'd have been like, yeah, Penn State's going to the college football playoffs, so I guess you take that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, the thing, and this is to your point, Nebraska, about the effort thing and the rolling over, or however you want to put it, effort or energy and focus.
I'm not saying that it's bad, that it's a egregious effort. I'm just saying that they failed to execute and do anything that they should have been, that they set out to do going into this game. And it's on the players and the coaches, because I thought there were things about the game plan on both sides of the ball that stunk.
So let me put it this way. I felt like Penn State, as we just mentioned, played with an edge in the game. It was their senior night. They were, on paper, they weren't playing for much, but it felt like they were, and they were going for those records. And Nebraska was the team that was standing in the way. And I just felt like, and this is not a one game thing. This is not this game and Minnesota game thing. I think there are a lot of times where Nebraska is just kind of going through the motions. I wish they would play with more emotion. I wish they would play with more edge. I wish they would play with more bite. And I think, you could kind of misconstrue that sometimes as like effort. Like I think they're giving full effort and they're trying to get in the right place and all that stuff. Like there has to be a level of focus in that. But sometimes it just doesn't it doesn't look like Nebraska's enjoying themselves either offensively or defensively on the field when things are going right, and especially when things are going wrong. And you have to have that when you got to play with an edge. Football is an emotional game. And when that team, especially with the talent they have, brings that edge to the park, you better bring it. And Nebraska I didn't feel like they have that. Especially after the first drive. Maybe that's when the game changed. I just thought all the air got sucked out of Nebraska after they got stopped on the 4th and 2 or 4th and goal from the 2. Maybe it's different if they score. Maybe it's different if they take 3. But it certainly wasn't really the same after that.
I don't think it's different if Nebraska gets a touchdown on that drive. For the record, I think that Penn State still asserts its dominance at some point. It may happen a little bit later. It may take them into the second quarter before it just clearly looks like Penn State's the better team. I could see that in the first quarter. Anyway, I was nodding my head along when you were saying that about how it looks at times like Nebraska's just not playing with an edge. And I think that that's the give and take that exists within this program when you have Matt Rhule and his personality as the head coach, because this is not a criticism of him, but I think that he coaches it in a style where the intent is to play hard for 4 quarters and to win it in the 4th quarter, and to not win games necessarily in the first quarter, to not, it's an NFL style, which is strange because Matt Rhule is a through and through college coach, but his time in the NFL proved that he was not a great match for that type of football, and he's clearly better as in relating with the college age and college level of development type of players. But he brings a style to a team, a personality to a team where it is outside of the norm for them to play with a ton of emotion. And that leads to some good things. That's part of what's allowed Nebraska to win some games in the 4th quarter and not lose all of the 1-score games. So I don't know how you assess this going into the offseason. And Nebraska, I think it has a mix on the staff of people who wear their emotions on their sleeves versus those who don't necessarily, like Rhule. All of his coordinators, you could argue, wear their emotions on their sleeves.
Well, I would say this, I think it comes from, I think you get that edge from a confidence. I think you get that edge from, I've been talking about this for a couple weeks now. I still think Nebraska lacks somewhat of an identity, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because that's usually the times we talk about it. But it comes, that confidence, that edge, it comes from, understanding that everybody's kind of rowing the boat in the same direction, and we know what we're going to be today, and all those things. And I hate to talk about all this, philosophical, mental weird stuff, but I feel like that game kind of warrants it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Rhule didn't want to go anywhere near that, the big picture philosophical questions. And I understand that in the heat of the moment after that game when Nebraska had to get out of there so fast. We talked about that, or I talked about that some on Saturday night. Let's take a break. It's funny you bring up identity and offensive identity, because I want to talk about Nebraska's defensive identity and how the Huskers are going to have to address that in the weeks and months ahead. That's coming up next. Got a message for you right now from a Wayfair, because you can feel it in the air. Not if you walked outside on Sunday around the state of Nebraska. Beautiful weather in the 60s, but the cold is coming and the holidays are going to be here before you know it, which is exciting. But getting your home ready for the guests and all of those celebrations that you're going to have can feel like a lot. Maybe you need some new serveware, or your guest room could use a refresh, some new bedding somewhere. Wayfair has got everything that you need to get your home holiday ready, from Christmas trees and wreaths to cookware, outdoor inflatables, bedding. It's your one-stop shop for every room in the house. Wayfair makes it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and every budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff, you can get all that you need without the hassle of delivery fees. So now, instead of stressing about all that you have to do to get ready, Go out and enjoy yourself with friends and family. Get organized, get refreshed, and get back to the routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
All right, welcome back, and thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. All right, Nebraska defensively, really, really rough. Just got gashed in the running game for nearly 300 yards. I don't have the stats in front of me. Nearly 300 yards, I believe.
241.
Okay, so not quite as close to 300 as I thought, but it felt like it, and it felt like Penn State could have probably picked their number.
Yeah, they only ran it 39 times, so
yeah. Woo. Yeah, that's a sizable number there. So this had been a thing coming into the game on Saturday night against Penn State, and John Butler last week called it kind of low-hanging fruit to say they're not good at stopping the run. Well, yeah, I mean, it ended up being that way. I don't, looking back on that quote, it's sort of, it hits the ears weird now, obviously, given they must have felt like they were going to have a chance to stop them on the ground, and they didn't. So maybe that points more toward what they didn't do in the game and less about personnel. I don't know. How do we read that all now that the pictures come together, Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, usually when you use that term "low-hanging fruit," it's meant to say like that's just too easy, to go there, and it's not an accurate assessment. I don't know that he was suggesting that it was an inaccurate assessment. I think if John Butler were to step away, and I think he's clear-eyed enough to know that if he were to step away from this game and take like a neutral party observation of it, he would say the same thing. He would look at it and he would go, Penn State has the advantage in being able to run the football against the Nebraska defense. But, Butler was trying to stick out his chest a little bit and say, but we're going to push back against that. We're not going to allow that to happen. I get that narrative's out there. It's low-hanging fruit, but we're going to do something about it. And that's kind of what you have to say going into that game. If you're Nebraska, you're 7-3 Nebraska. You haven't stopped the run necessarily, but you're not going to concede in these last two games anything to Penn State and Iowa. And okay, they're 0 for 1 now because Penn State went out and ran the ball. And to me, this opens up a question because we're getting close. We're getting close to the offseason here. Like we're less than a week away. We're 5 days away from bowl season. But like in December, you talk about it like it's the offseason, and then you go play a game. And then you continue with the offseason. Like Matt Rhule said last year, the Pinstripe Bowl was game 1 for the 2025 season. So it's going to be the same way for 2026. Like the season basically ends in 5 days. And what is Nebraska going to do with its defensive line in particular? Yeah, there were linebackers who were missing run fits on Saturday night, but I feel better. I feel good about Rob Dvorak and the ability that Nebraska has to take the linebackers who were there, build on what they've got, and turn Nebraska's second level into a group that can contribute to a run-stopping defense. When your defensive line is getting whipped the way that Nebraska was by Penn State, by Michigan, by USC at times this season, or oftentimes this season, that's the big issue. And it's hard for the linebackers to operate when the defensive linemen are falling over in front of them or getting pushed around. So it makes me say, all right, where are things with Nebraska in its defensive line and its defensive line coaching? Terry Bradden has been here for 11 games. I think it's worth taking a look back and saying, was he ready? Was he ready for this? He came from the NFL where he coached with the Chiefs as a D-line coach, and it's different at the NFL level. Those guys are pros. You're there to make sure that they're put in the right spots. It's not about development. And at Nebraska, with this D-line this year, it has been and has needed to be about development. And I have not seen the defensive line improve, show growth, get better throughout the season with Bradden in charge of this group. And I think we saw it in much of the time that Terrence Knight and his predecessor was in charge of that group.
I think he was dealt a tough hand in terms of just the personnel that he has, and with that being said, I think you're right though. We haven't seen the emergence of some guys maybe like we thought we would. Flashes from young guys like Winery and Keanu Davis and all those things. Like that's good. I think those guys will be solid players. So like to answer the question is where do you go from here? The first thing is a way more simple answer than anybody wants to hear, and it's just get a year older and get a year more experienced with some guys along those defensive line. And you do have to trust in that, I think, a little bit. But with that being said, they're going to look to add. They have to look to add. I mean, I think they're probably on the prowl for a true nose tackle type to clog things up in the middle. If they could find a guy out there, there's not a whole lot of guys that fit that bill and fit that profile that are going to be in the transfer portal and Nebraska will win battles for. So there's that piece of it too. I am not there yet with like the coach part of it. But yeah, it's obviously fair to ask a bunch of questions about what they've done up front on the defensive line this year. It hasn't been good, but I didn't expect it to be good. I really did. Mm-hmm. So I think they've made generally, Saturday was eye-opening, but I think they've generally made some pretty decent soup out of the ingredients that they've got with the defense this year.
I feel like when I'm watching the games and Nebraska's facing anything that resembles a potent rushing attack, you're just talking about maybe the 4 or 5 best teams that the Huskers have played this year. And Iowa this week is going to fit into that same category as a good rushing team. When the ball gets handed off and you're watching the play develop, and I see this more in the games where I'm in the press box in attendance than from the NBC view last night that I had. But you kind of feel like you're holding on for dear life with the Nebraska defense. Like the things start to develop and you can kind of see the movement. And it's not like great run defenses. You can see that movement at the line of scrimmage and things are like pushing back into the backfield. And you don't have a little voice in your head every time the ball gets handed off to say, wow, if a crease opens, this thing might go for a long gain. And that's how I feel. And that's how I've felt in watching Nebraska, not every play against USC, Michigan, and Penn State, and in the second half against Minnesota, but it's how I felt a lot of times when I started to watch plays develop in those games. Like hold on for dear life and hope that somebody can make a tackle. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way with one Big Ten team against another Big Ten team. Like Nebraska should be able to get a push or get a stalemate or have players getting off blocks to be in position to make tackles in the run game. And it just hasn't been consistent enough, especially against those good teams. Yeah, when they played Northwestern, I didn't necessarily get that sense. When they played Cincinnati, I didn't really get that sense, except with Sorsby at the end of the game, and that's a different deal. But those top teams in the Big Ten, and Nebraska's going to play a bunch of them next year. They've got to do something, and I think some of it is attitude and coaching up there, and a lot of it's personnel. I think that Rhule should look to rectify where they're at in coaching on that defensive line. And I'm not saying get rid of Terry Bradden. I'm saying get him some help. You have unlimited ability at this point with staff size to bring people in. Like they need somebody who has really coached D-line play at the collegiate level and had success doing it, because that person is not on their staff right now.
Yeah, I'm willing to kind of see how it all comes together with, people have been talking about Butler over the last couple of days.
Secondary coach.
I want to see what that looks like. Just year 2 of the defense for him overall. Are they able to put a better plan together with all the knowledge that he has now? Because some of the plan is flawed, right? But they understood the personnel that they had before the year, so it's not a surprise that they're one of the worst teams in the country against the run. That doesn't make it any better, but they baked it into their formula, right? So I want to see what kind of personnel they can get, and then how they can kind of scheme around it next year, as well as kind of boring as that is to say.
Yep, I hear you. All right. I think a lot of people are going to be impatient, and maybe that'll change if Nebraska shows out on Friday and gets to 8 wins, and there's a lot of feel good going into the bowl season. But I think people should remember, and I think they should remember inside the program. That's the most important place they should remember how they feel coming out of this Penn State game, because there's a lot of teams like that, Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State on Nebraska's schedule next season, and you're going to have to address some of the things that have gone wrong this year. And Nebraska, of course, is not blind to that fact. All right, let's take a break. Come back. I want to introduce a new topic that will start to take us into some off-season conversation about Nebraska football, and we'll talk about the trophies that Nebraska brought home over the past few days in some other sports. That is next. But right now, college football is entering its best week of the year. You might argue we could not be more excited about rivalry week, the tailgates, all the energy in the stands. There's nothing like it. But if you want to go to these games, actually getting into the stadium can feel like a big battle with endless queues, hidden fees, prices that jump at checkout. That goes for championship games. It goes for bowl games. That's why I recommend using Game Time. It's why I use it myself. It's the app that gives the advantage back to sports fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the lowest prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. The app makes it simple to see the view from your seats. You can use zone deals. Game Time picks the seats. You pick the sections, and then you save the money. Those things in reverse. You pick the section, then Game Time picks the seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, download Game Time today. Some breaking news as we record this podcast here. We're talking to you on Sunday. You can see from behind Connor out there in the desert that it is daytime, and it is Sunday daytime as we're doing this. Amir Brown, sought after running back from the 2027 recruiting class. Nebraska soaring up the boards in 2027 recruiting. The surge continues. He is from North Carolina. He has been getting peer recruited by Trey Taylor and Tay Ellis and Mike Erickson, the others from that class who have joined Nebraska already. So Nebraska's got its running back in the 2027 class. This is a top 5 class right now. Still more than a year away from signing with the Huskers, but they've got Amir Brown.
Nice. Yeah, there seems to be some juice behind this guy. Awesome. I've seen the graphic no less than 600 times on my Twitter feed for the last hour. So looks like everybody's pretty excited.
Yep. Okay. I want to introduce this. So I was going to bring this up during the time that Matt Rhule was a candidate for the Penn State job. And then that just ended really quick. So we didn't get to have DEFCON levels of concern about where things were going to go. So if you're not familiar with this, like you should be, it's a real thing. DEFCON 5 is like normal level. Yeah. And this is like national security. This is what we're talking about is not as important as national security. DEFCON 1 is like maximum readiness to go to war. And in the application to Nebraska football, DEFCON 1 would be everything has just completely hit the fan and it's time to do something drastic. So instead of applying this to a coaching search and saying DEFCON 1 means you have just lost your coach, we're going to say DEFCON 1 would mean Nebraska has entered like disaster mode. Where do we place Nebraska today? And we can track this forever. We can certainly track it through the offseason. DEFCON 4 is like increased readiness. DEFCON 3, heightened readiness. DEFCON 2 means, you're about to be in big trouble. And then I described DEFCON 1. Where do you put Nebraska today? On November 24th.
I would say, a whole heck of a lot closer to 5 than 1 for me.
Oh yeah.
Possibly even 5.
I think 4. 4 after Saturday night. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm putting them at increased readiness. Like your eyes should be open. You should be aware that there's some things going on that aren't moving in the direction that you would have liked to have seen at this point in the season. Nebraska has lost 3 of its last 5 games since the Matt Rhule conversation exploded. The Penn State Matt Rhule conversation exploded back on October 12th when James Franklin got fired. Nebraska was like, we got to keep our coach. We're going to do whatever we need to do to keep our coach, get the contract extension going, and he got it. And it was a good idea. But including that Minnesota game that happened right after the Franklin conversation began, Nebraska has lost to Minnesota, beat Northwestern, lost to USC, beat UCLA, lost to Penn State. So if the on again off again trend continues, Nebraska will close out the regular season with a win on Friday against Iowa.
It's really amazing how, I mean, I was talking about this on my post game show on Saturday night. Like, isn't this such a huge game for how you feel in the off season? You have a chance to make all these feelings that you have right now about the team kind of go away with a win against your biggest rival, a team that you don't beat very often, a team you haven't beaten Lincoln for more than a decade now, which is unbelievable to sort of think about, so like this is a real mood shifting type of situation, and equally mood shifting if they lose, and if they lose the same way they always lose, or if they get punished by Iowa or something like that, it's going to be really bad around here. And that's where you start moving up the DEFCON meter a little bit, because 7-5 after their start with another loss to Iowa, and looking the way you did against Penn State, and not showing for Minnesota and losing to USC and Michigan that way. That's all just going to bubble back up. So yeah, it would not be the case. The case against it would look very, very good if Nebraska were to lose this game. So there's a lot that hangs on it.
Yeah. You don't want to enter the offseason on DEFCON 3, and Nebraska's at 4 right now. I think we can agree. So we'll come back to that periodically through the offseason and see if the meter changes at any point. Okay. Final thing on this show, we'll talk a bunch more about Nebraska, Iowa after Matt Rhule addresses the media back in Lincoln on Monday, and we'll hear from Nebraska coordinators and players on Tuesday, then Rhule again on Wednesday, and then we'll all eat a bunch of food on Thursday and watch football on Friday. So Nebraska volleyball won the Big Ten outright. Huskers are 28-0 after the sweeps against Iowa and Indiana on the road against Indiana on Saturday. Things are progressing very well for Nebraska to get the number 1 overall seed. I believe the selection show will be this coming Sunday, the Sunday after Thanksgiving. The Huskers have Penn State at home on Black Friday, and then Ohio State on Saturday night, and the tournament selection show after that, and then NCAA tournament action on the weekend that follows in Lincoln. So that's a big accomplishment for the Nebraska athletic department to have made it this far with an undefeated record for Danny Busboom Kelly's team.
It's impressive.
They're a juggernaut.
Yeah. I remember having the conversation months ago about like, hey, are they going to be able to just sustain this the entire year? And I think the Big Ten's been a little bit down this year, but yeah, they are their own challenger. That's for sure. They've been
Penn State is down for sure. Lost its setter early in the year, and then Wisconsin was down when its setter was injured. Charlie Fearbringer, she's back, and the Badgers look pretty good. Probably not a team that Nebraska wants to see come to Lincoln for a regional like Wisconsin did last year. So I don't know if the Big Ten is as down as Nebraska has made it appear. We might find out in the NCAA tournament that it's just that Nebraska is so good in dominating the conference that the rest of the league has appeared down by comparison.
That's fair. And I only say that because it doesn't feel like they have a challenger, and they certainly don't in the Big Ten. I mean, the only challenger they probably have around the country is Texas.
Kentucky, I think Pitt are challenges. Kentucky has had a better Kentucky beat Texas. So Kentucky could get the number 2 overall seed. So that would be a rematch of a 5-set. If Nebraska and Kentucky were to meet for the national championship in Kansas City, it would be a rematch of Nebraska's biggest test by far, Nebraska's biggest test this season.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so
Texas is an intimidating force out there.
Heck of an accomplishment. I mean, to sustain that all season long. And then there is Nebraska basketball, who goes down to Kansas City and beats New Mexico and Kansas State on earlier in the weekend, and comes home with another piece of hardware for their trophy case, another in-season tournament victory for Nebraska basketball, just as they did last year. And there is some real good vibes going on with the Husker hoops team, who's scoring a lot of points and has a little bit of oomph to them right now. And the real hard part, with the exception, I guess, of the Creighton game, the real hard part of the non-con is kind of over at this point. So, I mean, there's a real world where Nebraska is undefeated going into conference play, and they continue this nation's longest win streak even longer.
And Nebraska will be favored in that Creighton game. The Huskers have two tune-ups before the December 7th Creighton game. So Nebraska should absolutely be 8-0 going into that game on December 7th. A chance to get, a third major conference victory. Nebraska's beaten Oklahoma, beaten Kansas State. And if it can pull that off against Creighton, which is down one of its best players, Jackson McAndrew, announced out for the season, the talented Creighton sophomore, just in the past few days. So Nebraska may be getting the Jays when they get back from Vegas, where Fred Hoiberg would like to see. That's going to look good on Nebraska. Now, it's a long ways away, and the Huskers have things to accomplish in the Big Ten. But a successful non-conference season, which it already is sure to be, is going to look very good on the resume in March.
Yeah, and I think aside from that, they just generally look good, right? Mm-hmm. It's great.
The offense is very tough to defend.
It's awesome to have this resume together, and that's obviously what it's all about. But I just think Nebraska looks good. It feels good. I feel like people like the team. They're kind of rallying around it a little bit. Yeah, no doubt. It's fun to watch. So this is really, really, really good stuff right now. They have a lot of the pieces of winning basketball teams,
and they have a little bit of edge. Yep. we talk about playing with edge.
Yep.
Rink Mast and Price Sanford, they bring some edge. Sam Hoiberg brings some edge to the court. Like, they have a defined identity on that team. And I'm not saying that as an affront to the football team. I'm not saying that because we talked about it with football. That's just what I see when I've watched them. I didn't think that the first couple games of the year, but it's what I've seen when I've watched them play for 40 minutes against Kansas State, New Mexico,
look like they're having
Oklahoma.
fun. They look like they're having fun. They're celebrating. They're doing all the crazy, bow, whatever the heck the celebrations. Like, they look like they're having a lot of fun playing basketball. And I think the crowds this season will continue to sort of prop that up as they get to PBA and get some big games going. So yeah, it looks really good right now for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, they keep that up. We're going to have to do some entire podcasts about Nebraska ball here over the next few months. So yeah, that'll be fun to follow them, fun to watch the volleyball run here in the next few weeks too. So lots to discuss. Moving ahead, we will of course be back with you on Tuesday to dig into this Iowa matchup, see what Matt Rhule has to say on Monday. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig is there to break down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championships and everything in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.